Hi, everyone. Hello and welcome. I am so excited to welcome you to Alta Live. This is the digital interview series we do at Alta Journal. My name is Beth Spotswood, and I'm Alta's digital editor. Today, I am so excited to hand you over to my brilliant colleague, Matt Haber, Alta's newsletter editor, for a conversation on the return of The Believer magazine. Started in San Francisco in 2003, The Believer is a magazine of books, culture, advice from comedians, and reviews of mammals and power tools. It was part of McSweeney's indie publishing empire and was kind of a starting ground for a number of incredible authors. It was purchased by the Black Mountain Institute in 2017, folded earlier this year before McSweeney's managed to buy back the title, and just launched it like minutes ago. So we are so excited to welcome its founding editors, Heidi Julavits, Ed Park, and Vendela Vida, as well as current editor, Daniel Gumbiner, to talk today with Matt about The Believer and this incredible magazine. Before I kick it over to them, if you are unfamiliar with Alta Journal, we are an award-winning quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. If you like what we do here today, I hope you will check us out. We have a monthly California book club. We host Wednesday events like this, and we mail out our beautiful magazine every quarter. You can visit us at altaonline.com, where you will find, in addition to our wonderful content, this interview. In fact, it's being recorded and will be posted there later this afternoon. We're also going to send you an email with that video, along with links to how you can subscribe to The Believer, which is at www.thebeliever.net. You can check out our Rosebud Awards. The Alta recently launched a Rosebud Awards, our end of the year roundup of our favorite things that happened this year. The Believer is one of them. The return of The Believer is one of them. So please check your email for that later on. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Ask your questions for Matt and our guests down there. They'll chat for about a half an hour, and I will return to wrap it all up. With that, Matt Haber, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you all for being here today. We're going to have a little digital conversation about the beauty of print. We got one print publication talking to another one, which is kind of cool. So I'll just kick this right off with asking about the new magazine. What are readers looking for in 2023 in a print magazine? What do you think? Take it away, anyone. Heidi,
go for it.
Okay,
Heidi.
I'll go for it, since I think we sort of talked about this last night at the event that we did. I think that you want to go to a place that's going to curate all of the stuff that's out there and try to tell you where to put your eyeballs these days. I feel so exhausted and overwhelmed by the options that I have. And I just kind of want a trusted source to go to that is going to say, hey, this is going to be worth your time. And so I really feel like even when we were not editing The Believer for the last couple of years, Daniel was still involved in editing. The three of us were not any longer. I really relied on The Believer as a reader then, and that was actually such an incredible experience to be a reader of The Believer.
Cool. Any other thoughts on 2023 and why print? Why now?
I also feel like you read more of a given print issue than whatever the web version of that is. You kind of have it, you just have it around the house, right? And especially something like The Believer, it's so beautiful. I have a copy of the new one right here. It's just,
hold that up nice and high for us.
Hold it, yeah, and it's really nice and fat, and just having this the physical copy in your hands, it's like something you're not going to throw this away, right? You're gonna keep it around. It looks stunning, and to have something this sort of packed with all different kinds of articles and interviews and featurettes, it's just nice to have it there, and you can pick it up, put it down, spend as much time with it as you want. It almost feels, I mean, this is a particularly long issue, but it kind of has that inexhaustible feeling to it. And yeah, I'm just very happy that it's back. Yeah.
So speaking of keeping it around the house, I've kept this around the house for 20 years, and I've moved probably a dozen times. This is Believer #1. which you can write to me if anyone wants to buy it for $1,000. So take me back to 2003, the three of you, and tell me what inspired you to start this thing in the first place. This is the first issue. Let's see, it's got Heidi's long essay about book reviewing. It's got a piece by Jim Shepard about Terrence Malick and Donald Rumsfeld. There's a piece by Jonathan Latham. There's an interview with Salman Rushdie, all in that first one. So tell me about what inspired that first one.
Well, I'll start by saying that Ed, Heidi, and I met out, oh my gosh, almost 30 years ago, we decided. We did the math. I'm not so good at math, but I think it was 30 years ago when we were at Columbia. We were all getting our MFAs there in the 90s, and we met on the steps of Dodge Hall at like a welcome to Columbia barbecue. And then we spent the next few years there doing, being workshopped and other things. And at the time I felt like I want to get out of here. I want to join the real world. Can't wait to work at the real magazines. And then I got out and I wished I was back at school having conversations I was having back in those days. And so I feel like for me personally, starting The Believer was a way to continue the conversations about books and literature with people who were, who also love books and literature, and open it up to other people as well, like our readers and our writers. And I felt like there was a way, when I was having really bad jobs in New York after graduating, and there's cocktail waitressing and copy editing, I felt like I wanted to be part of a readership again. And so for me, that was a very personal goal in starting the magazine. And so I can't speak for Heidi and Ed, but that was my impulse.
Yeah. Heidi, Ed, what were you thinking?
Well, we were also, not to say everything we said last night, but this was, we met in the early 90s. The magazine began in the early 2000s, the early aughts. And I think we decided that we actually, got in touch pretty late in 2002 and put together, that first issue that you held up, right? That comes out in March 2003, like from 0 to 90 or whatever in just a couple months. It seems amazing to me. And then pretty soon after that, it became, practically a monthly cadence of publication. And I joked that, we were much younger then and had more time. I don't think any of us had kids. So it's
but you had jobs and you were writing novels, so you were busy.
We were busy, but I think you have more. I think, to speak to Vendela's point, this idea that you're creating a community of readers and writers and thinkers, and just sort of, especially in the early days, like I feel like with each issue we were kind of defining what The Believer was and what the readership was, and so trying different things, different columns, seeing what people responded to. So it was very, very exciting, very heady. And I have to say, coming back to it this year, which I would not have predicted, for me at this stage of life, it's just been a tremendous joy. Like it was really fun putting this issue together.
Well, I'm happy to jump ahead to the new issue, but if Heidi, if you have any thoughts that you want to add about those early days, I'd love to hear those too.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way, just going back to one of the impetuses for starting the magazine, it was a little bit inspired, maybe that's the wrong word, since it was a negative inspiration, by the fact that, the internet really hadn't taken off yet. And so we still were really reliant on print publications for book reviews and any kind of sort of literary life of the mind, and book reviews and that kind of writing, the real estate that papers were affording, that kind of thing had shrunk, and people were even fully getting rid of their book reviews like altogether. And so we felt like it was a space where we could step in, and also just provide like length. I think the two things that we were most guided by were like, it could be as long as you wanted it to be. I mean, within reason, obviously, but you weren't beholden to this like 500-word essay, 500-word book review. And then the other thing that really excited us was the idea of it not being timely, not being pinned to like whatever books we're all talking about in January and February and March. So I think those were also two kind of compass points that really guided us.
If I could add another compass point, it seems like there was also a tonal thing that was set by your essay about kind of giving writers and their books the benefit of the doubt and approaching them as artists would rather than as harsh critics would. Was that a conscious thing that you thought about when assigning stories back then and up through iterations as it went forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it, I think one of the things that was, that we got kind of, how do I want to say, miscategorized for in the beginning was that we were against criticism and against
Mhm.
negativity and against like serious thought. And I think we just our notion of serious thought about a book was like, you want to try to persuade somebody else why they should read this book, right? I mean, it's in a weird way, like a negative review is a little bit of a waste of space because you're basically saying, here's a book you shouldn't read.
Right.
Right.
Here's a lot of energy
Yeah,
spent
and
on
this might
telling
be
you
the
not
10th
to.
review, 10th review is telling you not to read this book. So we thought, to follow up on what Heidi is saying, we also thought, what if we actually devoted that space to books you should read and writers you might not have heard of, works in translation, or a first-time poet being published by a small press? How about we use the same space to talk about those books and give attention to voices that aren't being heard? That was
in which, Heidi, you mentioned, book coverage getting, reduced. That's still the case today.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it's continuing to reduce. And I think that's still something that is important to the magazine, like Vendela is saying, the idea that, oh, there are so many books that are coming out that don't get any kind of coverage these days, just because there's so little space for coverage. And so that's still a really great thing the magazine can do. That has carried through to the new edition.
And do you think that since the four of you are all novelists and probably many of the people working for The Believer are novelists, you understand that in a way that like is kind of intrinsic? You kind of know that like a writer works really hard, even on a bad book, and you have to give them some space to accept their piece of work and analyze it in a way that's generous. And like, do you think of this as a service to writers and other creative people out there? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we would write about books that, we wanted, or we would sign other people to write about books that they really wanted other people to read, So in a sense, it kind of instantly took away even this question of like, oh, should we be like searingly honest about what we really thought, that kind of wasn't even a question or a decision that was on the table, because you would approach the article from like, or the essay from the perspective of, I just really want other people to read this book.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the 20 years, which is incredible for a print magazine, but the 20 years of The Believer, and kind of what are some of the stories that you're proudest of, or that you feel like could only have existed if for The Believer to publish them? Pieces that stand out for you over the last 2 decades.
I'll say one thing. I think a piece that Ed edited in the new issue, this Natalie So piece, is really incredible. I'm really just so overwhelmed by how much I love this piece.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, Ed, do you want to talk about it, Ed, since you brought it to the magazine and you worked with Natalie closely?
I could talk about it a little bit. This is a long piece. Maybe Daniel knows how many words exactly, but it takes.
I think it's 14,000, right?
Yeah,
that's my calculation.
Yeah, a lot of real estate in the issue, and it's worth it for every word, every sentence is worth it. I actually just met Natalie yesterday in person at this Believer event, but we had been in touch kind of the fall of 2020. The pandemic is underway, and I think we were both watching a lot of K-dramas, Korean dramas that were on Netflix and so forth. And I'd said, it would be fun to write something about it. And then I said, no, you should write about it to Natalie. And looking back at our messages, she was saying like she was kind of maybe at a low point in terms of her confidence in writing, because she'd been working on this piece that didn't seem to be getting anywhere with other editors. And just, out of curiosity, I said, please send it. And it's an incredible piece that has a personal angle to it. Her mother, in the early mid-90s, her mother had a computer company in Silicon Valley that got robbed by Natalie's mother's is Taiwanese, and this gang of thieves who were stealing computer chips from all these small businesses. It was like this Pan-Asian group, and it's kind of Pan-Asian, like from every ethnicity, kind of loosely organized. And so it's this great like crime story. It's a great personal story. It's a reflection on kind of the early days of Silicon Valley and who gets thought of in terms of who did the labor and who gets forgotten. And just a really amazing piece. Anyway, when The Believer was being resurrected this year, I thought about it, and I hadn't seen it appear anywhere. I kind of Googled, and so I asked Natalie if she still had it. She sent it to me. She added a lot of great stuff, and then me and Daniel worked on it some more, and it's just the timing was right, and we're really proud to have it in the issue.
Daniel, you talked to me a little bit about how hard it was to fact check that story just because of the amount of data. Can you talk about how much work goes into a piece like that readers may enjoy, but they don't realize like how many hours on the phone and on the computer people have to put into it?
Yeah, that one was really tricky to fact check because there were so many court documents. We had multiple people working on it at the same time. And there were also, some sensitive sources involved because it was a criminal case. There were FBI agents who Natalie had interviewed. Natalie had done really extensive reporting. I think that's part of what also, in addition to all the things Ed says, really sets that piece apart and takes it to another level. Is it's both this very intimate personal story, her own family story, and then she also has this deeply reported element where she's telling the story of this vast criminal case and gang syndicate, basically. So it really zooms out into and gives you a 360 view of this historical moment, this unusual historical moment where these microchip heists were happening all over Silicon Valley, which I'm from the Bay Area. I've lived in the Bay Area most of my life, had no idea anyone was stealing microchips, never heard about the microchip heist. So for me, it was this incredible thing to find the piece and come upon it and just uncover this odd corner of my own community, really, that I had never learned about. And I think to me, that's also really a sort of classic marker of a great Believer piece, is when it dives into some subculture or subject or cultural point of inquiry that you would never have known about, and the author really takes you on a deep dive and you sit down with it and you really get to learn something about a new subject, which to your point about going back to what can a print magazine do in this time. I think that's one thing that it can do, is you can really immerse yourself in a story, sitting and reading in print in a way that's sometimes harder to do maybe with online work. But yeah, it was a very challenging story to fact check. We had some heroic folks working on it, Ginger and Alexander Rothstein, who were helping on the case, and there was some translation involved, but it came out great, and Natalie just did a tremendous job, and we're super proud of it.
Cool. Heidi and Vendela, any stories from the earlier iterations or middle period that stand out as very Believerish for you guys?
I'm just thinking, well, one thing I've really loved is I edit a couple of the columns for The Believer. And so one thing I've always loved about The Believer is next to these long, in-depth reported pieces, you'll have shorter columns. And that's what's kind of fun too. It's not every article is, 14,000 words. And so I've just had a lot of fun, especially with this new issue. I know we're talking about the past too, but I've always had fun editing Nick Hornby's column, stuff I've been reading, where he kind of takes us on his personal reading jag through books that he's bought and books that he has read, and how they actually rarely do they align. And he kind of talks about life as a reader. And that's another way that we're not like a book review per se, in that I think book reviews are obviously people get assigned a book and they're paid to review one book. And Nick actually in his column writes about what it's like to actually be a reader and buy a book and have every intention of reading it and then getting 3 pages into it and putting it down. So that's really been a highlight of the magazine. And he's been with us since near the start of the magazine. And it's a column that was ongoing. So I really feel like that's a big cornerstone of the magazine, but also the other columns too. Like we have Carrie Brownstein, just started writing an advice column for us with this new issue. And it's basically full of advice that she would not take herself necessarily, I think. The advice has been there since the beginning too. That's really a big part of The Believer. Yeah, it used to be called Sedaratives, and because Amy Sedaris used to write for it. And so that's always really fun too. I think for me, what's so fun is having these long pieces next to shorter pieces, and there's a lot of candy in this issue. I'm just looking at our charts, our schemas are really fun. And so those are always been, I think the juxtaposition of the lengths has always been something that's been really important to the believer. Because Heidi was talking about something that's curated for you, but it's not just all long pieces that are curated. There's also like shorter pieces and short interviews, micro interviews, if you don't have a lot of time.
I feel like one of the things in the first issue and a few of the early ones was reviews of kids, like kind of a little funny review of a kid. And I guess those kids are old enough now that they could be writing for you. They're probably in their mid-20s.
That's a great idea. We should reach out to them.
Oh, that is such a good idea.
We should profile them as adults.
So Heidi, any stories that are kind of your favorites?
I was thinking of one, and this one's actually I don't want to say this is it's an unusual believer essay, but it was quite serious and at times hard to read, by Ron Curry Jr. It was called "Have You Seen Ayla Reynolds?" And it was about like a 2-year-old girl who disappeared in a mill town in Maine, and it came out that her parents had killed her, but it ended up being a piece that was really about sort of the multi-generational deprivation of resources for families in this mill town in Maine, and how people are now on government assistance, but there was a lot of drug use and alcohol abuse, and in a strange way, it really casts a light on an area that was, at least 4 years or more before the 2016 election, where everyone was like, wait, we forgot, we forgot this part of the population. Anyway, so that to me, I remember editing that piece, I think maybe also just because it was so hard to read. Yeah,
we'll link to those. That sounds like a really great piece. Let's talk about the new issue and kind of reformulating, I don't want to say rebooting, but changing the formula. What did you realize you could fix or you could update that maybe hadn't worked in the past or couldn't work until now because of culture, technology, whatever? What new stuff were you able to do that was not available in 2003?
Well, I don't know. And nothing immediately comes to mind that wasn't available, but we did want to keep the developing the magazine and changing and adding new things. And one of the things that we've included in this new issue is a game section, which we've been playing around.
Tell us about that. Our copy editor will love this game.
Yeah, there was actually a games issue back in the day, and that was always a very popular issue. People always talk about the games issue, love the games issue. We actually went back to the guy who wrote the crossword for that issue, Ben Tausig, asked him if he wanted to curate a crossword for us moving forward. So we have an ongoing crossword that he's going to curate with lots of different puzzle writers, and we also have this fun copy editing game that our longtime copy editor Caitlin Van Dusen made, where she's inserted some errors into a passage from a classic book, and every issue is going to be a different book. So yeah, there you see it, Wind in the Willows. So the idea is that you mark up your page and you try and find them, and then the answers are in the back. And we're going to keep adding lots of different games, so that'll be a fun thing for folks who subscribe to see how that section shifts over time. We're already planning for next issue a Rebus game, that sort of image-based game, and we'll have that illustrated by a cool artist. And so yeah, that's a fun new feature that we included in this issue, and we're going to keep developing and having fun with.
Anything that you wish you could have had long ago that now you are going to get around to having now? Stuff that you kept putting off, and now it's time to do it?
Well, one thing, I mean, we don't have any imminent plans for this, but I have always thought that it would be really fun to do a single issue that's just kind of like one big piece.
I think we call that a book.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, you've got the perfect balance, fine. Yeah, everything about it. But yeah,
wrong.
I think we'll have some surprising special issues. I think whether it's that or some other unusual projects, we're going to keep. We'll have our regular issues annually, and then I think every once in a while there'll also be a surprise. So that's another great reason to subscribe, because there may be some cool stuff coming.
Yeah, underline that. That's a reason to subscribe in print. So I think we're going to bring Beth back and we'll have some questions from the audience and hopefully we'll have time to answer them. But thank you all so much. Beth, if you want to pop back into our little window here and join us again.
Yes, we've got one question right from the get-go from JD Beltran. It's been too long since I was able to access Magazine Stand and buy something in print. Where can I get this print issue? Now, JD, I will tell you that while fully paying attention to all of this, I was able to subscribe to The Believer in about 2 seconds just now while listening. So I encourage you to go to thebeliever.net and it is so fast. You just do it. $60 for a year. So go right ahead and do that right now. But if someone wants to buy your brand new issue, is there a place where they can get it IRL, folks?
Yeah, it won't be available for a little bit because right now it goes out to subscribers first, but then it will be in bookstores and on some magazine stands. So you should be able to find it out at your local store.
Maybe hold it up one more time for us.
What does it look like again? What are we looking?
Yeah,
Your
there you go.
independent bookseller. That's what you're looking for.
But yes, I would
Third
second
class
that
and
the easiest way is to subscribe and then you get every one.
While
Yep.
you're at it, Alta has a subscription too.
Great.
There you go.
Just
It's a
it's
great Christmas present, holiday present. Subscribe to
Mhm.
Alta, subscribe to The Believer. Yeah.
right. We should figure out a little joint thing there. We'll send you that email. So was that a confirmation, Heidi, that Nick Hornby's What I've Been Reading column has returned, is still part of the magazine?
It is. I think Vendela should talk to this because she
Sorry.
is our Nick Hornby conduit.
The Hornby Whisperer.
Yes.
Yes. Is it a surprise or is it no? Is it what was your question, Beth? I forgot.
It's Sheila's question. And yes, you're reviving Nick Hornby's What I've Been Reading column.
That stuff I've been reading. And it's always really fun to see it. Sometimes with the music issue, he'll write about stuff he's been listening to, which is also really fun. But yeah, he's been a mainstay of the magazine and we're really proud to publish this column.
Someone asked, you had referenced the City Arts and Lectures event last night. They were unfamiliar with that. Can you talk a little bit about the event that took place last night?
Sure. So we were at City Arts and Lectures at the Sidney Goldstein Theater in San Francisco, and we were all reunited for the first time with all together for the first time, I think, in many, many years. Actually, Daniel, I don't think the four of us have all been together. We were on stage talking about the history of the Believer. It was a celebration of the Believer's homecoming to San Francisco. So.
And that's just, it was a live event. It's not captured online. We can't go watch it.
It'll be broadcast on KQED in about a few.
Fabulous.
Cool.
More questions popping up. Mary asks, I'd love to know the pubs and media outlets that inspire each of you other than Alta. We can go, we'll do a roundtable as I'm looking at it. Heidi, what publications, media outlets inspire you?
I mean, we talked a little bit last night about other publications that we had been reading recently, and one that I mentioned was The Point, which is out of the University of Chicago, and they write a lot of long essays, a little bit more newsworthy or public events kind of, or not public, current events, but that would be one I would cite.
Vendela, what about you?
I would say the Paris Review. I interned there for many years when I was young, and I just loved that publication. And the Writers at Work series, the interviews with writers, really inspired the section of interviews in The Believer, and the fact that we always try to interview at least one writer, include one writer in our interviews. And so that was a big influence on me. And also the beauty of that publication. I think that the Paris Review, the reason people keep them is that they're so beautifully designed, and the covers are so special, especially right now. I think recently they've been incredibly beautiful. And that was our goal with The Believer too, to make a magazine that you did not want to throw away, that you wanted to keep on your shelf and did not want to recycle.
Ed, who
Just
inspires
briefly,
you?
I guess, taking it back to when we first started, I think I was probably at the height of my magazine and journal reading phase in life. And I just remember certain columnists, this guy, James Burke, who wrote, I think it was called Connections for Scientific American, Ron Rosenbaum in the New York Observer, he wrote The Edgy Enthusiast, the TLS, things like that, Paris Review, Lingua Franca, the kind of magazine about academia that wasn't necessarily for academics, just things that engaged you, that were smart, that you didn't need to necessarily know about the subject before going in and reading and enjoying the piece. So I think, in a sort of distant way, those are still sort of my models. I'd also like to mention Paul Collins, who was he had written many things for McSweeney's, and I think had published a book with McSweeney's by this point, Banford's Folly. And then he wrote many pieces for us in The Believer, and just to take it one step further into this kind of next gen issue, the new issue that we have, there's an article here by a writer named Ryan Walsh, who I had worked with as a book editor, who, when I said, let's look for some blurbs, and he said, let's get Paul Collins. And I'm like, I know Paul. So it's kind of like, and Ryan's piece in this issue is great. It's about the Edward Hopper painting, Nighthawks, and these weird iterations of it that you might see at diners, where it's Bogey, James Dean, Elvis, and Marilyn Monroe sitting around a lunch counter or a pool table. And he does this kind of deep dive that I think is very, Paul Collins inspired. So I like seeing, current writers like looking to the past of The Believer.
What about you, Daniel?
I think I would say Ziziva, which is a local magazine, and mostly West Coast writers, but it has a really global reach and perspective, I think. And it's edited by Oscar Villalone, who is in this issue, who has a brief little department about the 24th Street McDonald's in Mission, and the way it sort of has functioned historically as this community hub. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think Ziziva would be. I love reading Ziziva, and have read it for a long time.
Well, I love that shout out to a very close Alta partner. I will actually we have one question that I know that it will translate into a shout out to another friend of Alta. Heidi, are you in a bookstore right now? Someone asks.
Oh, I mean, in effect.
Where are you?
I'm at the McSweeney's office.
We're all at the McSweeney's office. We're just in different corners of it.
Yeah.
They had previously decided it would be weird if the four of them appeared squeezed into one laptop's camera, a little bit like a Friends episode. So this is much more, I guess, professional. Yeah. But McSweeney's is also one of the homes of partner of 826 Valencia, it kind of looks like you're in the.
I know, I tried to cant it so it wasn't just this like gray felt background, so it's a little more interesting and looked a little more literary. So yes, there it is over there.
Yeah. So no, not in a bookstore. With that, I am so excited. First of all, I'm excited as a brand new 5 minutes in subscriber to The Believer. I'm very excited to be back in the game on The Believer. And again, encourage everyone. You can also visit thebeliever.net and sign up for a newsletter, super easy as well. We're going to send you links to that, links to the Rosebud Awards, including mention of The Believer. I saw you already posted it on your website, guys. Thank you so much. So thank you so much to all of our guests. I do encourage, before you guys go, I do invite you to join us next week, December 14th at 12:30 to Alta Live, where we will be discussing the survival in the Sierra, 6 men hiking through the Sierras, the Walker serial that we posted here at altaonline.com. That will be led by our managing editor, Blaise Riga. We're going to send you info to that as well. Matt Haber, thanks so much for running this for me today. And of course, so excited, Believer folks. Congratulations on everything. And we are cheering you on and wishing you all the best. So thank you so much, everyone.
Long live print.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.